Okay. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Good to see you all as y'all trickle in. Welcome to this afternoon's special presentation, Earth Day CLE presentation, Black, Brown, and Green, examining the effects of environmental inequity in Houston. And we are so blessed to have with us our esteemed speaker and presenter, attorney Amy Dinn, who will be talking about environmental inequity, specifically, through the prism of race and class. And she has also a lot of really interesting sort of Earth Day conservation facts that she'll be sharing with us as well. But before I introduce her and we get started, I first had just a few housekeeping matters to share with you all. First, this presentation has been approved for CLE credit, so I will be putting the course number in the chat box for you all. Also, Attorney Dinn welcomes questions. So as we go throughout the presentation and something sort of catches your eye or your ear and you're interested in learning more, please put that in the Q&A feature, and we'll get that to Ms. Dinn to review. And then also, in addition to thanking all of our Houston friends for being here with us today, I also wanted to shout out Austin Young Lawyers Association, because I know some of their members are watching as well. And I wanted to especially thank Jenna Malsbury, Megan Kempf, and Emily Morris, who are on the Community Service Committee for Austin Young Lawyers, who have organized an Earth Day of Service for Austin in solidarity and support of HYLA's Earth Day of Service this Saturday. So thank you, ladies, for your leadership. Thank you, Austin Young Lawyers, for your support. And thank you all for being here. And of course, thanks to Attorney Amy Dinn for presenting her very special CLE with us today. So to introduce Ms. Dinn, Amy is the litigation director of the Environmental Justice Project at Lone Star Legal Aid. Part of the firm's Equitable Development Initiative, the program started over 6 years ago with specific funding to address environmental justice inequities and low-income communities in the firm's 72-county service area. Amy leads a team of staff attorneys focused on community-driven environmental permitting challenges, outreach, and litigation around air pollution, water quality, and land contamination issues impacting their clients. Before joining Lone Star Legal Aid, Amy's practice focused on general commercial litigation and bankruptcy work at both big law and boutique litigation firms. And she graduated from the University of Texas School of Law in 2000. So in addition to her being an amazing advocate and attorney, she also is a Longhorn, which makes her like coolness factor go like times 1,000. That's right. So with that being said, I will pass it along to Ms. Dinn, and thank you again so much for being here and sharing your experience and heart with us today.
Oh, great. Well, thank you all so much. I always enjoy getting to talk to young lawyers, particularly ones that are just getting going and are interested and engaged in organizations like HYLA. I am a former HYLA attorney, and it was very foundational to me when I started practice of, getting to network with young attorneys as well as educational opportunities like this. So I always think it's kind of fun to hear from more experienced attorneys that kind of what their life career path has been. And I've got kind of an interesting one because I didn't start out as a public interest lawyer. In fact, I started at big law. I don't think I even knew what a public interest lawyer was when I went to law school. It wasn't something that they really emphasized at UT at the time when I graduated, I don't know, 20 plus years ago. And it kind of just became my path. So and where I am now. So just do a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. I was going to kind of give you all a little background on how I got to where I am at Lone Star Legal Aid now. Kind of what our environmental justice project has been doing for the last several years. And really highlight some environmental inequities in Houston. I think it's very easy for us to be up in our skyscraper offices and not realize some things that are really happening on the ground and impacting communities in a very severe way, both from a health perspective as well as property interest. And then I've got a couple Earth Day challenges for you. Up to you whether you want to accept them, but I'm throwing them down there in case you're interested in picking them up. So quick introduction to me. You heard about my bio. I went to the law, but I think I always had in my heart this passion for pro bono work, and that's really, I think, where it started. I got my first pro bono case, and that was just like really cool, like to be able to help someone that was really in need of help. I think every firm that I was ever at won a pro bono award because I was doing so many pro bono cases. That led me to be on the board of the Houston Volunteer Lawyers for a time and service to that organization, which then I transitioned to being on the board of Lone Star Legal Aid at the point where the CEO approached me and said, "Are you interested in being a lawyer here?" And so that's kind of how it got started. And I also didn't start out, you probably heard, as an environmental lawyer, but I have become one in the last 6 years, really focusing on this community advocacy work and bringing the skills that I developed along my career in litigation and mediation and advocacy around a lot of these issues to bring them home to help communities now. And so I present myself as a very well-rounded lawyer to all of these communities that typically have no access to justice whatsoever because they have limited resources. We're mainly working with small community groups that don't have any funding, that are trying to pull together a group of concerned citizens that are trying to impact change in their community. And sometimes that can be around a concrete batch plan, it can be around an issue like illegal dumping, it can be around a highway expansion. And we're doing our best to represent their efforts. So let me just flip over to the next slide. I don't have a lot of slides, but just like, let's get through these. What does our environmental justice project do? We have traditional attorney-client relationships. Lone Star Legal Aid is a full-service, like nonprofit law firm that helps specifically people that are eligible for our services, which are focused on low-income individuals. And when we say low income, we're talking about people that are 200% of federal poverty level or lower. And that is over 2 million people in our service area that are in that category. So we're really serving a very impacted population, a very vulnerable population, and we provide direct services to them without any cost. Those services include litigation, administrative challenges. We also do a lot of community advocacy, so we'll help write public comments to them for their group or for them individually on proposed projects. We attend public meetings, we make comments, we provide information to them around these potential projects. We bring in experts and technical experts if needed to help support those efforts. And we do a lot of community education. So I do a lot of presentations out at community meetings in the neighborhoods to let people know what's going on. We can do educational workshops regardless of whether someone is eligible for services or not. So we really focus on things that the community is concerned about and try to share knowledge out generally. So focusing specifically on some of the environmental inequities that we've been addressing here in Houston. I think y'all all probably are aware that our air pollution, our air shed in Houston is not the best. Recent headlines show that we've long been in non-attainment for ozone. We have some of the highest, I think we're like the 6th highest city for particulate matter in the country. And we have communities that are immediately next to refineries. And so some of the communities that I'm representing are like Manchester in this picture right here that you can see, where there are houses next to tank farms, as well as basically surrounding the Port of Houston in Galena Park or Pleasantville. And these areas have really special challenges, right? They're going to have more air pollution burden than a neighborhood on the west side. And that is borne out through air monitoring and statistical analysis of the health of the populations. There has been recent reports that look at zip code being very determinative, particularly in Houston, of your life expectancy. There's almost a 20-year gap in some of the communities that we work with versus a wider, more affluent neighborhood like River Oaks or Westview, as far as what these life expectancy outcomes will be for these neighborhoods because of these additional pollution burdens, either from air pollution, particularly from air pollution, but also other contaminants in their environment. And so we're really trying to bring down pollution levels in these neighborhoods. We're trying to look at permits that are proposed by the industry and look at them critically with a lens around cumulative impacts. How many facilities are in a particular area? We're trying to advocate that there are pollution burdens that should just not be borne, or the numbers need to come down. And that's important advocacy, because otherwise our state regulatory agency would just take that permit and approve it if it met all the administrative requirements. So having that ability to engage around that with a community perspective can be very helpful in making pollution reductions at the agency level. One of our recent successes has been around illegal dumping. If you have driven around areas in Northeast Houston, you may have seen a lot of dumping. Also in other areas, Sunnyside, this is a very common thing in these neighborhoods to have just piles of debris, what they usually call heavy trash or things like that, just left on the side of the road. Some of that is directly related to the fact that these communities are often sited close to landfills, and as people are headed to the landfill, or the landfill's closed, or the landfill won't take what they are bringing, or they're going to charge, they'll just drop the stuff on the side of the road as opposed to take it back home or dispose of it properly if the landfill won't accept it. And so these communities really end up with landfills, mini landfills in their neighborhoods, immediately affecting property values as well as visual blight. But there's a parade of environmental issues that are around illegal dumping, such as mosquitoes, such as possible water contamination. And then in areas like Trinity Gardens down here that you can see that has open ditch drainage, when these ditches start to fill with heavy trash and other debris that isn't being properly disposed of, it can basically clog up the drainage system and cause flooding. And the neighborhood that we particularly worked with in this illegal dumping issue in the city of Houston is Trinity Gardens, Houston Gardens, and it had, I think, tens of thousands of homes flood during Hurricane Harvey. I think they were up to 40,000 homes flooded, largely because of this open ditch drainage situation did not work, and the amount of water that was fell during Harvey. But the illegal dumping certainly was a contributing factor to the higher flood rates in that area. So how did we go about addressing an issue like illegal dumping in the city? Well, we filed a civil rights complaint with a number of federal agencies at the end of 2021. And the Department of Justice found our profile of this particular community and the inequities that it has faced over the years, mainly from lack of investment from the city of Houston, very compelling. And they took this issue of illegal dumping and turned it into a citywide investigation of the city of Houston's handling of illegal dumping in minority communities like Trinity Gardens, Houston Gardens, which is predominantly Hispanic and African American. And that has now led the city of Houston to announce its One Clean Houston plan, which you can check out on their website. It's an $18 million commitment that the city is making to reduce illegal dumping in the city and immediately address it in many of these neighborhoods. So we're excited with that result. There's obviously still some more substance to be put on the plan, but these are ways that we are immediately helping neighborhoods hopefully improve these systemic issues that have been plaguing them on a number of levels, as I described. I think one of the main challenges that we have in Houston is no zoning, and I think everybody sees zoning differently in Houston. I think if it's working for you, it's great. If you're representing clients that want to have the freedom to do development in neighborhoods or in the city overall, it's wonderful. For some communities, though, it ends up being like this picture below, where you've got a residential neighborhood with a truck yard next door, with a very high fence, and then 18-wheelers all parked there completely unregulated. And not really clear what's in or going in and out of these trucks in the neighborhood. So there are concerns about crime, human trafficking, and then just general appropriate, buffers between residential and commercial properties. And it's not just truck yards or these kind of things that can result, it could be anything that can show up in some of these neighborhoods where they lack property protections like deed restrictions. So one of the things our project started, because without help from the city to do things about these truck yards from a permitting perspective, we needed to put restrictions in place in some neighborhoods to keep these types of things from happening and keep them out of neighborhoods, because 18-wheelers pose risk for children playing on the street and different things. So we started our deed restriction project, which is basically creating new restrictions, property restrictions for a neighborhood. And then we work with the community. It's real community learning. We work with them to determine what they want to see in their restrictions, and then conduct a deed restriction campaign that helps adopt restrictions that reflect the community's needs in order to put protections in place to keep these things out. And then after we get the restrictions, we still have to work with the city to actually enforce the restrictions and have them acknowledge that the community has done this deed restriction effort and have them enforced. But we are continuing to work on that front. But this is one of the few ways that we can address no zoning, so that these types of situations that you see in these two pictures do not happen in other low-income neighborhoods. Let's see, siting of concrete batch plants. This is another big inequity we have in Houston. Again, largely around no zoning. We have been working for several years now to challenge the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality's standard permit for concrete batch plants. They basically tried to push an amendment through in 2021 that failed to do proper protective analysis for crystalline silica, which is one of the raw ingredients that goes into the concrete aggregate that's made in the concrete batch plants. And if you're wondering what a concrete batch plant is, let me just pause and tell you. It is basically a plant that takes the raw materials for concrete, mixes them together, and then kind of what they call a bag house, and then spits out the fully mixed concrete to go into the concrete mixer. Then it is driven to where they need to lay concrete. And as we all know, Houston is kind of like the unofficial concrete capital of the world. We have over 180 concrete batch plants in Harris County, and largely these are sited in low-income neighborhoods. And so not only have we had a litigation challenge pending against the state that their amendment to their standard permit in 2021 was a violation of the law for the lack of the protectiveness review that failed to accompany that approval. But we have also filed a civil rights complaint, particular to Harris County and Houston, because these concrete batch plants are being sited throughout neighborhoods, and the TCEQ has not understood that there's greater exposure to the residential side, as well as cumulative impacts from multiple of these facilities all being sited close together in the same neighborhood. I think you may have, hopefully you've heard something about this concern being raised. These concrete batch plants are being sited next to county parks. They're being sited in neighborhoods, like directly across the street from people's homes. And these facilities are putting out large amounts of particulate matter and other airborne contaminants that can cause really respiratory issues. They also, most of them are permitted to operate 24/7, and they're quite loud. So when the bag house starts up at 3 or 4 in the morning, this is affecting quality of sleep for residents and really becoming what we would call a nuisance facility in the neighborhood. So this is one of the things we're trying to increase protections around for communities. And this ties into our deed restriction project to basically try to insulate communities from these types of things being cited, since we do not have typical residential zoning to fall back on to keep these things out of communities. So that's a really big issue. The state has just released a proposed amendment for 2023 to try to address the concerns in our original litigation, as well as the civil rights complaint that's pending. So again, we're making progress in raising these issues, and it's very clear that the TCQ has recognized that for Harris County, the setbacks can't be universally across the state. The protective setbacks for some of the pollution causing elements of the concrete batch plant are now going to have to be sited further away from the property line for Houston because of the protective analysis that's already being redone as part of the 2023 amendment. So these are initial good steps that are happening as a result of this effort to hopefully make it more protective for communities, as there's still a way to go, but we're making progress. Large infrastructure projects. Oh my gosh, I don't know who hasn't heard about the I-45, the North Highway, Houston Highway Improvement Project. We worked on this for, I don't know, 4 years to try and raise concerns around the neighborhood of Independence Heights. That was going to be severely impacted by this project. It's the first African-American town incorporated in the state of Texas, and had historic preservation that was really important to the community and the residents that had lived there that was likely threatened by this project. And so we spent a lot of time through the National Environmental Protection Act, which is called NEPA, National Environment Policy Act, NEPA, to raise concerns during the environmental review project, a process for this project. And as you probably have heard, there was a civil rights complaint filed by other groups after that work was done for our community. We were able to reach an agreement with TxDOT early on to address the community's concerns, but because of the large amount of displacement in this project, there was a lot of moving parts that still need to be resolved for other neighborhoods as that complaint moved forward. And that was just resolved, I think, around December of last year. So that project is moving forward, but there are a lot of significant important protections that were built in through the advocacy that we did for the community that we worked with, Independence Heights, on that project. Legacy contamination. This is another inequity we have, largely also due, I think, possibly to no zoning, because again, we have nuisance type facilities here, railroads, largely situated in residential areas like Fifth Ward. And so if you've been paying attention on the news, you know that there's now 6 cancer clusters that they have found in the Fifth Ward area, largely around Union Pacific's rail yard site that's here. These properties in yellow are contaminated properties that have been identified in the neighborhood based on groundwater contamination levels that have been tracked through environmental experts that show that there's levels of creosote, DNAPL that is in the groundwater for these properties. And the current levels of contamination are still being studied and reviewed. And it's historically thought that they were much, much higher than the current concentrations, which is why we're now seeing the cancer cluster results in these neighborhoods for people that used to live there and still live there from the historic exposures in the neighborhood. The EPA just got involved after years of advocacy that we've had around this particular issue with the state, who has been in charge of reviewing the requested cleanup permit from Union Pacific. And EPA has now ordered a really intensive scope of investigation by Union Pacific for this area to hopefully bring about a not only really informed decision around appropriate cleanup, but also a community engagement plan that will ensure the community continues to be involved in the decisions made around cleanup. So we're very happy that the city and the county got involved to help push forward the issues that the community have been raising for a very long time. And then also just to bring up dredge dumps. I call them this, the Port of Houston is doing a very large ship channel expansion. As you probably know, most of the ports are trying to expand their ability to bring in larger vessels that draw much deeper. And part of the Houston Ship Channel involves not just maintenance for ongoing operations, but also trying to make the channel deeper. Where does that dredge material go? Well, in certain instances, historically, the dredge material has gone into a number of communities like Pleasantville, Galena Park, Channelview. They have basically created a dredge dump, a dump of dredging material, an unregulated landfill in many of these communities, and have failed to test at all what has been dumped there. And we're currently in conversations with the port and the Army Corps of Engineers that are heading up that Project 11, which is the ship channel expansion dredging project, to try to see if we can remedy that situation. I think there's been some recent reports in the news about it. But these are just kind of like an overview of the different environmental inequities that we've been dealing with in Houston, just kind of trying to give you a snapshot of those things. If y'all have any questions on anything I've covered, I know I've been kind of like just marching through these issues, but there's a lot to just to touch on. I think if I had to kind of sum it up with a takeaway, for those that were like me, that maybe 6-7 years ago were unfamiliar with environmental justice, I feel like it's very much having a moment now, and you're hearing a lot more about it in the news. And I think that's because some of this advocacy, as well as understanding of these inequities that are here in our city, are finally coming to light. People are beginning to understand how this disproportionately impacts these communities, not only from health outcomes, but also property values. And as the city itself realizes we only have so much room to grow, there is actually a push from the city to try to reclaim some of these areas, try to clean them up, because this is the place where we all have to live, and there's only so much room for all these people that are coming to the city. So I think the city is starting to realize that areas like Fifth Ward, we can't afford to write those off, because we're going to need it for places for people to live as the city continues to gentrify, particularly inside the loop. And whether that partner is coming with other motives or not, I don't know, but we particularly are happy to have partners for the communities that have been impacted and been trying to raise these issues for a very long time. And so there's a lot of, kind of complicated challenges that we're dealing with when we are working with community groups, with other community partners, and really trying to stay true to our clients' concerns and what their objectives are, is an important voice that we're adding to the process and trying to push these issues forward to ensure that the outcomes are directly tied to what the community is wanting to see. So we play a very important role in that, not just in the ultimate, does the project move forward or not, but did the community have a voice and how things move forward. So we're very proud of that work, and it's exciting to be a part of all of these cool things that are going on in our city to fix these inequities that are now coming to light. And hopefully we're making it a better Houston for everybody. I have some Earth Day challenges for you in case you're interested.
Oh, and
You
Amy,
got a question?
yes, ma'am. I had a question, and then we had one of our attendees who had a quick question. So one question is, what recommendations do you have for how folks can get involved with your great efforts, whether as lawyers or just as Houston residents? What can we do to support you in this incredible work?
Perfect setup for my next slide.
Oh.
So thank you for the question. This is what I was going to talk about next. So perfect. So I have a couple Earth Day challenges for you, because I figure, hopefully I've tugged at a few heartstrings, like maybe there's something I can do. Yes, there is something you can do. First, if you see illegal dumping anywhere, even if it's not in your own neighborhood, take a moment and just report it. The city has devoted these resources to try to fight illegal dumping. They've set up a 24-hour hotline. You can save it in your phone and just call them, give them the address where the dumping is. They now have crews. They have paid for specialized crews to come and get that money. Get that trash. And so we need to take advantage of those resources to help as a community to change our mindset about what we do about illegal dumping. And that first is just community reporting. They've also got a 311 application. So that's something easy you can use. Put the app on your phone and just fill out the little report of where it is. You can drop a pin and let them know. They will come clean it up. And that's a help you can do regardless of where you are in the city, right? Like everyone's driving around, people see trash, but what are we doing about it? And if we all take a very active reporting, you can kind of rack up your illegal dumping reports and track them, give yourself a gold star for everyone you report. But that's a real way we tangibly can help the city clean itself up. Also, you can report environmental nuisances. We have an environmental nuisance reporter. This is something that we generated with a team of law students at Georgetown Law School a few years ago. And basically, you've got the QR code, and there's also a website. You can go to it. It's a really simple form you can fill out really quick. It sends a report to us as well as our state regulatory agency about water, land, air pollution, anything that you see out in the community. If you smell something, if you see something that looks funny in the water, or there's particular noises or things that you're hearing from facilities, this is a great way and a tool that we promote in our communities to help get us aware of things that are going on in the ground. So you're welcome to use our environmental nuisance reporter and share that. If anybody's interested in really getting involved on that, let me know. I'm happy to share more resources around. We've got magnets and different things to help promote that. And then you can take a pro bono case if you really want to get engaged. We definitely have a volunteer portal where you can sign up and express your interest for volunteering with our EJ team. We have transactional work as well as litigation work. So regardless of what type of lawyer you are, we can probably put you to work on an environmental case if you're interested. And it can be of different, levels of involvement, but particularly we're always looking for lawyers to help us with our deed restrictions, which is transactional work. And then we have a number of different cases that are going on in communities around either enforcement of deed restrictions or other things. That happy to always have help. As a nonprofit law firm, we have a few staff and a whole lot of problems to solve. So we're always looking for help. So we'd love that. You can join our environmental justice team. We are looking for attorneys. So I have actually 2 staff positions posted right now, and I would love to get some enthusiastic lawyers to join our team. We have, at one point we had up to 5 lawyers on the team, and we're really hoping to get our capacity back up. We have lots of funding to tackle a lot of these issues given our success, and we're looking for people that are motivated and interested in solving environmental problems, working on things like climate change, trying to help these communities that really don't have the resources to address these problems themselves. So that's why we kind of help fill that gap. So yeah, I think we got did I nail that question? Okay.
Fantastic. Well, and it was answered so beautifully. We actually have a couple other questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's go.
So another question is, how can we better hold elected officials accountable to taking action for climate impact and environmental justice issues, particularly when some leaders may view those particular issues secondary to issues such as crime and policing, although a lot of those there can be some intersectionality there, but that was one of the newer questions.
Yeah, I think this is a very good question, because how do you, in a city like Houston that does have a lot of problems, even beyond the environmental problems, we just touched on the environmental problems, but like we have problems with crime, and we have problems with paying firefighters and policemen and all of these things, and how do you get to a point where you've got relevancy and attention of the elected officials? And I think our legal dumping is kind of like a good, issue to put out there as far as how we got their attention. We got the DOJ to file an investigation against the city, because before that, illegal dumping wasn't a problem in Houston. We didn't have a problem with illegal dumping. There were no illegal dumping problems. I'm saying that completely facetious, but that is what our mayor was basically saying. And now he's on board that we do have an illegal dumping problem, and we are going to fix it. So it's amazing what a little Department of Justice investigation will do to kind of have someone refocus on what the priority is. So I'm not saying everybody needs to file a civil rights complaint, but it has been an effective solution to getting attention around these issues. But I think it really starts with the community, right? Like, I think you as a citizen in Houston, if you've got something that you're trying to push forward, getting down to City Hall, using all the tools that we have in the toolbox to engage around that, and getting, connected with your city council member, letting them know what your issues are. It can be a long process. I mean, in the East End, we're constantly fighting railroad stoppages where the trains just stop on the tracks for hours. I didn't even address that issue because it's something that's been an ongoing problem in lower income areas for a very long time, where the railroads are built out, and it is a huge nuisance, as well as being, a problem for first responders and things like that. So there's actually some work being done on that issue locally. We made some progress, but ultimately that is a federal solution. So trying to kind of like figure out what the city has control of, what it can fix. I think the permitting problems around zoning is just a huge issue in Houston. I think you've probably recently seen the dust up that's coming about Airbnbs and whether there's hotels or whether in neighborhoods. These are all like interesting legal problems, right? Like, is the city ordinance speak to this? Does it tell us, if this is a hotel or not, and if it needs to be regulated as such? And like I said, around the deed restrictions with the city, I mean, we've put the restrictions in place. We show them the restrictions, they're valid. And then we try to get their legal department to do something about it. And they tell us, we don't have the resources, or they try to back away from their requirements to, for replats and things like that. So I think there are just some fundamental things that the cities still need a lot of work. But we can all be part of the solution around those problems too. So it starts with advocacy, it starts with being persistent, it starts with getting down in front of council and telling them what the issues are. So those are the strategies that have worked so far, although not all of them have resulted in the same outcome that the legal dumping did, but certainly we've had some success, I guess.
Yes, no, for sure. You kind of answered this question or provided a foundation to as a response to this follow-up question, because someone did ask, if you are a citizen who has filed 311 reports related to environmental nuisances, or one example they gave was illegal dumping, and I know that there's that DOJ little prick has certainly helped, but if there's this sort of persistence in these 311 reports being unresolved, I know you touched on like going to city council and maybe doing some research on city ordinances, et cetera. But for a citizen who's really trying to get that resolved and isn't getting a response from our officials, any sort of additional insight on what he or she could do?
Yeah, so specifically to the illegal dumping issue, the DOJ actually set up a hotline for that, like an email address where people could forward complaints from 311 that were not being addressed by the city, or any other issues
Okay.
around illegal dumping, and that's part of the civil rights investigation that's still ongoing. I can share that email out. It'd take a minute, but like I've got that. That's very specific and tied to illegal dumping. They always say that the best way to deal with something that's unaddressed through 311 is to call your city council member, or even an at-large member may be willing to help, depending on who they are. But some of them are very good and responsive to the larger community interests. But they do say that that's a good place to start if you could build a relationship with your council member to help kind of push some of those issues that aren't getting properly resolved. But for the 311 complaints about illegal dumping, I would elevate those right now while we have the DOJ investigation going on through their things, so they're aware of something particularly that hasn't been addressed for a very long time. That would be important for that investigation team to know, particularly if you can get it in the next month or two, because I have a feeling that may be wrapping up soon. So
perfect. Thank you. And I reached out to that attendee. That's a really good question, and gave you my contact info. So please reach out to me so that I can forward that hotline info from Amy to you within this. It seems like a really good time frame to do it in. And then actually, Amy, I had a quick question, because I know we're running out of time. You had mentioned, community partnerships, how that's an integral part of the success of your work and your team's work. And I know this presentation in particular is focusing on Houston and other sort of like metropolitan infrastructural issues. But I think about places like rural communities where there's environmental health inequities, and places like colonias along the border. And I was just curious as to what sort of outreach y'all have there, since your like service area is so vast, out of curiosity.
Yeah, so our service area doesn't extend to the border.
Okay.
That is served. There are 3 legal aid organizations across the state of Texas. We have Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, we have Lone Star Legal Aid, and then Legal Aid of Northwest Texas. So we kind of like split the state into 3rd. And the Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid has everything along the border. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have our own colonias. Houston, if you are familiar at all with mud districts, sometimes
Yes.
things can get set up. They may or may not fully provide appropriate services to the community that they're supposed to support or say that they're going to be setting up. So these like kind of makeshift mobile home subdivisions kind of spring up, where it's just a whole bunch of mobile homes, but they don't have the typical infrastructure support that you would see in a regular subdivision. And so we kind of have these small colonias. There's a number of them up in Montgomery County near Kingwood, and some of those I guess are in Houston proper, but we are aware of those. We have a housing group that typically deals with those type of issues, but yeah, there's a lot of very vulnerable people, particularly those that, you know, may or may not speak English, that may or may not understand all of the rights that they should have as far as when they come into a subdivision like that and be able to advocate for themselves. So that's really important work. I didn't highlight that as an environmental equity, but it is. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a housing inequity that we have as far as allocation of resources to different communities. And a lot of that is built on the mud structure that we have to allow people to move forward on those things.
Thank you. No, thanks, Amy, for that. Yes, that clarification of yes, of these colonia communities really being set up anywhere where there's none of that sort of like waste management infrastructure or access to water. Absolutely. So yes, we have them here in our own backyard, and I know there's much work to be done there that all of you are addressing, and I don't know how y'all have the energy to do it all, but I just admire you so much, and I know I speak on behalf of everyone attending. We're just so grateful for being a hero in many ways and really trying to help bridge this gap of this issue, because it's so pervasive. It's in all of our cities, it's across the state, across the country and the world, but it still doesn't get as much attention as it should. And so just thank you for leading the efforts on that and giving us some homework to help us. So did y'all to everyone watching, I placed the course number for this great presentation in the chat box, and Amy, I'll be getting that to you. But before we let you get back to your busy day, any parting words or last words that you want to share with all of us watching about what further we could do to support you in your transformative work?
Well, I mean, I just appreciate y'all being interested in this topic and becoming aware of these things that are ongoing for communities. I think when you see opportunities to help, if you can take a pro bono case, if you can, help support both communities and individuals that may be socially vulnerable. That's one of the reasons why I transitioned over to legal aid, was because realizing that we really do need to make sure that our safety net stays in place for community, because that's a very important part of our economic system, is making sure that people can function, that they, that they're not worrying about putting food on the table and different things like that. They're able to address more things in their communities and take on projects like this. So we definitely want to help support however we see an opportunity, people that are less fortunate than we are for any reason. And so that's just like part of what really drives my work, is so I hope, if anything, I've given you some ideas of ways.
Yes.
You can be on the lookout for these things in our own backyard or communities. So
absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. If anyone has any questions, may I forward those to you after okay.
I put my email on there. You're welcome to email me for pro bono opportunities, more information on our nuisance report, or anything you want to follow up on. I'm happy to have a conversation over coffee, or just like answer questions as you think about it and reflect on it for Earth Day.
Yes, that's right, and beyond. Yes. Thanks again, Amy. This was wonderful. Thank to all of you for watching and for your support. If you want to join us for our Earth Day of Service, feel free to send me an email. You'll find it on HYLA's calendar. And of course, to join Amy as either a staff member or as a pro bono volunteer, reach out to either of us and we'll be sure to get you set up and on your way. So hope you all have a great rest of the week, a great weekend ahead. And again, Amy, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Y'all take care. Bye, everybody.